is the feeling that the Democrats are like, it's okay to just keep spending the money? I can't believe that's true.
It was until just recently when we passed the $1.5 trillion IRA, Inflation Reduction Act, where we spent $600 billion on infrastructure. They were all saying, this is not a problem. That's not a problem. All of a sudden, they are, some of it, not all of them.
What do you think changed?
Inflation.
Just seeing inflation.
The Inflation Reduction Act.
And then it, I mean, you got to give time. Like sometimes I'm always curious. It's like, well, they just passed it like 2 months ago. What did you expect to happen? It was like, the numbers are turning around tomorrow. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the show. This is the 435 podcast. This is my 7th take, but I'm Robert Macfarlane, your host. I got Jeff Watkins riding shotgun. Today, John Curtis joined us in the studio, the Blue Forum studio, and we talked about energy and climate change. We talked about immigration. We talked about the budget, military, what's going on in Ukraine, Israel. We hope you guys get a lot out of this episode as he is running for the U.S. Senate seat that was vacated by Mitt Romney. So John Curtis is going to be on your ballot come another election year. We hope you enjoy this episode and understand who he is and how he could represent the state of Utah for the U.S. Senate. Enjoy the episode. Hit like, subscribe. We keep gaining momentum. We're getting new followers and new listens every single day. So we're so thankful for our sponsors and the people who support us. We'll see you guys out there. Enjoy the show. Representative Curtis, thanks for coming on, man.
Good to be here. Yeah.
I've listened to a lot of like the different interviews and things that you've done over the last couple of weeks. But just for anybody listening in, so you were COO of Action Target.
Yes.
So you ran a business for 10 years out of Provo, Utah, right? I think was the headquarters in Provo.
Exactly. And we actually, people won't know what that is. But we designed, built, installed shooting ranges.
Shooting ranges, yeah. For custom for the colleges like Slick, Salt Lake Community College.
We actually did that range.
That range.
But we did ranges all over the world. I traveled the world, big, small ranges. A lot of it was U.S. military, law enforcement.
Yeah.
But we did some residentials like Carl Malone's home. And
yeah.
So it was a fun business.
So you're built and founded a business and sold it.
Yes.
Big business, operate all over the place. Then you were the mayor of Provo.
Love that gig.
Love that gig. An executive position, right?
Yes.
So even at the local level, though, but a very tough job, especially in that town. And the time frame. Remind me of the time frame.
2010 to 2008.
Oh, see, right, another rough time frame, right?
When I took over, we were just at the height of the housing crisis.
Yeah,
and city
foreclosures.
City revenues were way down.
So you that was definitely executive crisis mode, right?
Exactly.
So I think you probably learned a ton there. We could probably have a whole show about just that.
And I'd love to do that too.
And then so you've been the District 3 U.S. representative for the last 6 years.
Correct.
Is that right?
And just for your listeners, most of them won't know what District 3 is, but if you think about Flaming Gorge, Daggett County, the very top of the northeastern part of the state, all the way down to the Four Corners region.
Okay.
All along the eastern side, taking in parts
of Moab,
Park City, Deer Valley, ski resorts.
I think
also
Price too, right, John?
Price.
Yep.
Yeah,
Price.
I lived in Price for 18 months.
Oh,
so
great.
If you want to ask me any questions about carbon,
all of a sudden this voice came out of nowhere.
I know. Yeah. Jeff comes from the other room in there. Yeah. Price. So that's District 3, and similar to District 2, where we have kind of the other half of the state, right? It's on the west side, right?
Yeah, they used to be split up almost in 4 different, almost like a pie shape. But this last redistricting gave CD2 and CD3 the vast geographic areas of the state.
Yeah.
But we also have part of Salt Lake, the 4 of us share Salt Lake, and then I have part of Utah County as well.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so that's kind of your history, and now you've thrown your hat into the ring for Senate.
I'm in.
You're in. How many so far? I was gonna pull up all the names. I was like, I don't know if I want to look now. Wait till after the primaries. But how many?
9 candidates.
9 candidates. Less than I thought actually was going to be.
Yes, it's and I would say if we're honest, 4 or 5 of those are serious candidates that seem to be really leaning into running, and there's some they may show up, but so far haven't really shown up.
Yeah. So caucus for the Senate seat happens in June.
The primary is in June
Primary.
25th.
Uh-huh.
The caucus is in April.
Okay.
And the convention actually is in April. And the caucus comes first. They select the delegates. Then
That's
they go
right.
to the convention in April, and then the primary in June.
Okay. So April's really like you're racing to April 'cause based off our system, or maybe help people understand how it works.
So yeah, it is a little confusing. In the convention, if you can get 40 plus 1, you end up on the ballot in June. You can also get there by state law by gathering signatures.
Okay.
So several of us will do both paths. We'll go to the convention and try to win there, but we'll also gather signatures. And I'm gathering signatures, which, if I'm successful at that, will put me on the ballot in June.
Okay. So it could be that in June we have 3 Republicans
I would
running?
be surprised if we didn't have 4.
Okay.
You could conceivably have more. I know 3 of the candidates at least 3 have said they're going to gather signatures. Now, just saying it doesn't mean they'll actually do it.
Yeah.
But
how many signatures do you have to get?
It's 28,000 signatures.
Wow, 28,000.
And I've tried to do it before with volunteers. It's near impossible. So most of us will use outside firms that help gather them. So we do some with volunteers and some with a firm.
How do you feel about that? Like thinking back, because it hasn't always been this way.
It hasn't. So I will tell you, we could have a whole show, right?
I know.
On this topic. But I will tell you that history has proven that some candidates who the general Republican Party would select cannot make it through convention. And that's why they've put the signature path in. Is the delegates always wanted to and do feel like they can vet the candidates and then present them to the general public. And the general public has kind of pushed back and said, well, wait a minute, you don't always pick the same people that we want to vote on.
Yeah.
And so thus you have the signature path.
Well, so like my parents, they were, basically lifelong Republicans.
Right.
But they were in Southern California. Our whole family, not the whole family, but my parents and I, we moved here in about 2015. And so they just didn't quite understand how the Utah system worked versus how the California system worked, right?
Right.
So just kind of trying to understand these different processes and how it goes about. She's like, well, how do I find out my delegates? I was like, it's a challenge. It's a challenge. You have to go be involved in the party. You really have to be active in the party if you want to have influence over a delegate who then at caucus will vote for that person.
You're exactly right. If you don't go to those caucus meetings, you can't, that's how you get selected as a delegate, or you vote for a delegate that represents you.
Right.
So if you're not going to those, that's where most of your influence is.
Yeah. So I can see how the signatures, it just on its surface or on its face, like 28,000 signatures, and you're like, I can't do it on my own. I have to go to this service to do it. And I've heard this dozens of times. RFK, I know, running as an independent, he's literally having to gather millions of signatures across the country just to get on the ballot.
It's a high bar.
It's a high bar. It's a really high bar. So, and it's an expensive bar.
It's expensive. It weeds out candidates with resources and without, which I think is unfortunate.
Yeah.
People. I wish there was a path that wasn't based on resources.
Yeah.
I think that would be better.
Yeah. Well, we're a big country too. So we're a big state. There's a lot of miles between the top to the bottom. And I guess it's not for the faint of heart. Politics and government is not for the faint of heart. You got to be committed to do it.
Well, those who watched me make a decision about this will know that it's a big decision.
Yeah.
Right? Like you're not just signing up for a little league sports team here. This is a big deal.
It isn't. And I think we could probably talk a little bit about that, just that decision, because I know it seemed like you were in and then you were out and then you were in.
Yep.
But there's just this scramble, right? It's almost like somebody hikes the ball, and it's like you have to. Everybody's looking for, hey, can I count on your support? Can I get your
yeah, and everybody's trying to get a jump on the snap.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
And,
I saw Trent Skaggs.
Yes,
Skaggs or
yes.
Staggs? I keep messing.
Staggs with the T.
Staggs. I saw a sign up for him. It said Staggs for Senate back in early 23.
Yeah. I think Trent was one of the first ones in.
And I was like, I don't even know who this guy is. And I didn't even, there's not even a Senate race. Who is this guy?
Yeah.
But he was like a year ahead of time.
He was early in, and he had decided he was going to run no matter whether or not Mitt ran or not.
Right.
And others were waiting to see.
Yeah.
And I was off in La La Land being a member of Congress, enjoying that.
You're like, I'm running the Republican Climate Caucus, right? You're like, I'm the brain. That's my focus.
Which we ought to talk about because that's kind of a big thing.
Yeah, I think it's a big thing too. I know I listened to you talk a little bit about it as an independent, a lifelong independent for me. I'm a Republican in name only. You can call me a rhino, not in name only, but I am a Republican, but normally I'm an independent. But coming to Utah, independents can't vote in primaries for the Republican Party. So you're kind of like, well, I don't want to be on the sidelines. I don't want to just be watching the game.
Sure.
You got to get into the game. So, I can see a lot of these different sides. So Republicans for climate change, it doesn't hit me the way that some Republicans are like, you say climate change and it's
just the word climate. And I'll give you a good analogy.
Maybe Jeff's that way. Jeff, does it give you goosebumps when you hear somebody say climate change, Jeff?
Well, it's changed so much. I mean, it used to be it's not climate change anymore, right? It was like climate chaos. And then,
crisis
but on its face,
the inconvenient truth, Jeff, it's an inconvenient truth. I know it's inconvenient for you, but the oceans are going to flood and thousands of people are going to be.
We're all supposed to be dead right now.
We're all supposed to be gone. Yeah.
So and this dialogue is showing you exactly why Republicans don't like to talk about it. There's this extremism associated with it that turns Republicans off. Mm-hmm. And so as a general rule, their chest tightens up and they become very, very defensive because they know the next thing that's coming is, we want you to give up your car, your gas stove, your beef. You have to do all of these things. And Republicans are just going, it's so fast, right? I don't buy that.
Yeah, there's this slippery slope that happens, right? And then because you can anticipate, it's like, well, you did this, so what's keeping you from doing this, and this? And then we paint this picture of what the roadmap's going to look like, the inevitable roadmap, and we're convinced that that's the truth, where it's somewhere in between. It's never as bad as we think.
Yeah,
but it's never
I think
as good as we
that's fair. And I think what many Republicans, they see that like slippery slope and say, the problem with me putting my little toe there is you're going to ask me to go down that slide, right? The next thing. And the way I've come at this is I truly believe Utahns / conservatives care deeply about the earth. And I was troubled by the branding that we somehow didn't. And that branding comes because we don't like the extremism. We don't want to talk climate. And yet my aha moment was like, we're actually really good at this. We're the original environmentalists.
Yeah.
Now, Republicans don't like that word, but we've always cared deeply about the earth. And we, too, want to leave it better than we found it. And the real truth is there are Republican solutions that don't feel like that slippery slope, that keep energy independence, that keep prices low and affordable, that don't demonize our fossil fuel industry. And Republicans aren't talking about them, so they're not on the table as options.
Yeah. They're getting left out of the decision making because they're taking a stronger stance than
they're not. So we just stand back and say what we don't like.
Right.
What I'm trying to get us to do is stand up and say, but here's what we like. And oh, by the way, it reduces more emissions than your plan.
Yeah. Like let's have the actual debate as to what when put into practice, when the actual doing, the rubber meets the road, what is actually going to accomplish things and what's not, what's going to take us away or lead us down a wild goose chase that we look back and we're like, whoa, that was a mistake.
And I'll tell you, if you want to see that, look at Europe. So Europe started down this path, and they were told to
Germany specifically.
Germany is a really good example. And so, and I was in Belgium, and Belgium had 7 nuclear plants. Environmentalists said they're bad, shut them down. So they shut them down. It was providing half of their energy with 0 emissions. They replaced that with Russian petroleum products that are very, very dirty.
Yeah,
if you talk about dirty, I mean these are really dirty, and it's now their enemy.
So as somebody looking out, so I can't help but think, oh, there's some conspiracy. That's what they wanted the whole time. Like like nowadays, it's so funny how my mind goes to that.
No, there is hardcore evidence that Russia was actually involved in the propaganda movement against fossil fuels to get United States to shut them down. So now we buy them from Russia. And I'll give you, here's another good example.
China's doing something.
Yeah. So 15 years ago, Europe produced as much natural gas as Russia. Europe said fracking is bad. Part of that came from Russian involvement. Information that fracking was bad. So they stopped fracking. Today they buy fracked natural gas from Russia.
That's crazy.
An enemy, right?
Yeah.
And my worry is the same.
And they're forced to.
They're forced to. The United States is on that same trajectory. We're going to shut down nuclear. We're going to shut down fracking. All of a sudden we wake up and we're buying dirty fossil fuels from an enemy. And the reality of it is we can do it. We can have it all. We can have our fossil fuels. We can reduce emissions, but we have to be smart about it. And Republicans have to start talking about it.
Yeah, we got to get to the table. We have to be the one in the room.
So that's interesting you say that, because when I do a PowerPoint presentation, I show an empty board table. Like, we're not there at the table. Having these discussions.
Yeah, and it's because of the citizens that are supporting the officials, right? They're getting the message up that, like, hey, my constituency does not want to talk about this. And so we have to, it has to go bottom up, right? We as the citizens have to talk up to our representatives about what's important to us and get them to the table, right? Is that what you're saying?
And the reality of it is important to us to have affordable fuel, reliable fuel. That's very, very important to us. We don't talk often enough about it's also important for us to be as clean as possible. And the problem is that clean has been presented to them as an either or choice. Like, you're either going to have to pay a lot for our energy, you're going to have to lose our energy independence to be clean. And that's the message I'm trying to get across, is that is not true. The same policy that's best for low, affordable prices for national security is also the same policy that's best for the environment. Nobody's telling people that.
Right.
They wouldn't push back so much if they knew that was the case.
Yeah, that's the interesting part, is because then you get into the lobbyist portion of it, right, where there's influence. And with energy, when it comes to energy, these are massive lobbyist groups, and it's very difficult to run any kind of power, no matter what it is, whether it's solar, nuclear, fossil fuels. It's difficult in this country to do any of those things.
So, Utah was trying to get, some cities in Utah were trying to get a nuclear plant. 12 years into it, $100 million into permitting it, and they were halfway through and they just gave up.
$100 million?
Yeah, into permitting.
Just permitting.
Yeah. And so that's actually one of my big areas of emphasis in Washington is permitting reform. And you are right. Democrats are actually helping with this, because although we want to permit things like pipelines and things like that, they want to permit solar farms, and they can't because the laws are set up in a way that just make it nearly impossible.
Yeah, and that was like, I was thinking about Southern Utah. We get all the sunshine, right? And we have all these vistas where in some places, it's an eyesore to see the solar panels. Well, in Southern Utah, you can't see the tippy tops of a lot of these plateaus that, you have to like make a mission to get up there. And then it's just sagebrush anyway. It's not really anything up there. And I think I couldn't help but think, like, there's a lot of opportunities for us to do solar down here.
Yeah. And so this is what I'd like Utah to do. I want Utah to lead on everything, right?
Obviously.
Not just fossil fuels, but innovation, technology, renewables. We should be leading in Utah. The world wants to buy power. Let's have it come from Utah. The world wants to buy clean power. Let's have it come from Utah. And let's make sure our fossil fuels are as clean as possible, which we are doing, by the way. The industries are doing a remarkable job in cutting back on emissions. And so let's make sure that our fossil fuels always have less emissions than others. And by the way, right now, U.S. fossil fuels are produced 40% cleaner than Russian natural gas.
Yeah. And I don't think anybody, like, until I heard you had said that, I didn't have any idea.
Yeah. So listen, we want to reduce emissions. Let's ship U.S. natural gas overseas.
Right.
Fuels our economy, makes other countries dependent on us for energy, and guess what? Lowers emissions.
Exactly.
What's wrong with that? Yeah.
But then we have an executive that shuts down any of our natural gas. Like, that just happened this week, right? The Biden administration, they shut down all liquid natural gas projects, is what the headline said.
Export. Yeah. And so here's the hypocrisy. I was over in Europe, and a woman from Germany had circulated a letter to U.S. members of Congress asking them to sign a ban on this exact thing.
So is it just exportation of it?
As I understand it, the ban on exportation or on any facility that would help export it is what they're trying to ban. So as I understand it. Now, this woman from Germany that had circulated this letter was bragging that they had been successful in weaning themselves off Russian natural gas onto U.S. natural gas, saving their economy, saving them from being dependent on an enemy. And she was the one that was circulating this petition. So I raised my hand.
Yeah.
I said, so how is it that you don't want anybody, other country, to be able to do what you did with this? And she was embarrassed, but she pivoted to, we're going to get off natural gas and we're going to go to renewables, wind and solar. So somebody else asked her, like, when? And she said, 2045.
2045. Oh my gosh.
So, like,
just long enough to where it's not her problem anymore. She's like, I'll be retired.
Exactly.
I don't have to account for any of this.
And so people are just not being practical. So, and this is why when Republicans hear that, this is why they push back and say, that you can't do that. Doesn't make sense. You're fooling yourself.
Right. It's just such a it's a tagline. It just feels like you're saying it feels good.
Yep.
I think virtue signaling, right?
Yep.
It's like you come up and you want to say the right things because it makes people feel good, but when you actually have to put it into practice, it doesn't quite work.
But I want to double down on this. The United States can lead the world in energy production, and it can be clean, and that also can include fossil fuels. We don't need to demonize fossil fuels to reach our emission goals.
And would you disagree that it almost is going to require fossil fuels? We can't get to any renewable, whether it's hydro, whether it's solar, whether it's nuclear, whether it's wind. We can't get to any of those things without still continuing to use the fossil fuels that we have, right?
There's not an energy expert in the world who will pretend we won't be using fossil fuels in 2050.
At some capacity.
At some capacity. And I actually believe in 2050 that fossil fuels would be burning at net zero carbon. I think that they will get there. They're spending billions of dollars on things like carbon sequestration and direct air capture. And this is why I say, look, don't rule them out. But don't forget, clean is important, right?
Yeah.
Everybody can agree less pollution is better than more pollution.
Yeah, absolutely.
But let's make the race about less emissions, not what type of fuel, and let the market drive this thing.
Right.
And that's all the fossil fuel industry wants is give us a chance, right? Like tell us what the goal is. Well, the goal is affordable, reliable, clean. Okay, we're affordable, reliable, we're working on clean. Yeah. If you say to renewables, the goal is affordable, reliable, clean. Well, they're affordable, they're clean, but they're not reliable. Yeah. They've got problems with storage and things. Okay, well, that's the goal. You guys go figure that out and you'll be relevant in 2050. Nuclear is got a cost issue right now. It's reliable. And
why does it have a cost issue?
Yeah, so primarily because we've built 2 nuclear plants in the last 3 decades.
So it's innovation?
It's a scale and an innovation thing. And I think that as we turn that corner and start doing more nuclear, you'll see the price of nuclear come down. But right now, just because we stopped really innovating 30 years ago.
Because of the EPA and regulation?
It really is a branding problem for nuclear. So the 3 Mile Island, Chernobyl, these large disasters scared people enough that we just stopped. The reality of it is nuclear is one of our safest forms of energy. The problem is when there's a problem, everybody hears about it. It's magnified. And I do believe, too, we can also innovate to safer and safer nuclear as well. Yeah. But that's nuclear. It's like fossil fuels. You can't really describe a 2050 where we have the energy this world needs without nuclear and without a lot of nuclear. Yeah. Everybody, even my Democratic colleagues are with me on that.
Yeah. And going back to the branding thing, I can't help but think of like the coal mines.
Right.
And the cars that explode and the gas stations that explode, propane tanks that explode and go flying and destroying property but if it compounded by thousands and thousands and thousands of times, but basically it's 2 nuclear meltdowns.
Right.
2.
And if you look, right. And so you're exactly right. It's all about branding.
It's all about branding.
And if you look at the actual statistics, nuclear is one of the safest forms of energy.
Yeah.
But it does have a branding issue, and then it also has a problem that we've gone so long without innovating and opening up new plants. But that's changing. That innovation is changing quickly.
So I guess I'm going to ask again because maybe I'm just a dummy. So you said $100 million on this project.
To try to get through permitting.
So permitting. It seems to me like a big cost is like it's the permit, and that's regulated by who?
Federal government.
The federal government
primarily. There are other state and other things, but the federal government is the problem here. And there's a regulation called NIPA. So there's a couple of areas of permitting. One of them is nuclear, is the safety issues and things like that. And clearly we want to be careful, but we can't take 10, 20 years to permit a plant. Who would invest in that?
What? Because they just flushed $100 million as a prime example, right? Yeah. That goes back to that expense piece.
Now, Pacificor's doing a nuclear project, and Warren Buffett's behind it, and they've got some federal funding. They can weather the storm because they have that financial backing behind it. And I actually believe they'll be wildly successful, and they want to open up a number of these nuclear plants. I think they'll do it. I think they'll be successful. And I think things like that will start a trend they'll make it easier for other people to get to permitting. Does that make sense? They'll bring the price down. So I think you're going to see some good things on nuclear. But there's another piece of this called NIPA, and it's the environmental standards associated with this. Republicans, by the way, put these into place in the 70s. and
way to go, guys.
Yeah, it's not like we're arguing with the environmental standards because here again, I don't care which political party is. You don't want to destroy the earth. We all understand these environmental standards are important. But what happens with NIPA is it takes years and years and years and years just to get an answer. Mm-hmm. And then once you get that answer, you can sue for years and years and years after. And so these environmental groups, once it takes a decade to get an answer, they'll start suing. Even if the answer is yes, they'll start suing and postponing these projects another 10 years. What investor is going to invest in a project like that? So the capital is not flowing to these projects. The problem for Democrats is this is the same as you said earlier for solar and wind farms and things like that. They're also being prohibited by this abuse, this weaponization of NIPA. So mission number one right now in Washington, D.C. for me is permitting reform. I'm vice chair of the Energy and Climate Subcommittee, working really, really hard to find a cross-section with Democrats on this. And Democrats are cooperating because they want to permit their projects. So we're trying to find a cross-section, and it's very important. And it's the energy future of this country is dependent on our ability to do this. And our economy is dependent on our energy future, and our national security is dependent.
Energy is a primary driver of all economic development, right? It's one of the big drivers of it.
Yeah, and so this is where I find myself in the middle of, and I love that position because almost every woe from the economy, from all of these things, the inflation, all are tied to this energy policy. And by the way, I like to smile when I talk to groups, and I said, okay, who can name the country's energy policy? I've never had a person even try.
Yeah.
Right. We don't have an energy policy. We have a climate policy.
Yeah.
Which is another reason Republicans need to engage in this, because if you're not willing to talk climate, you're not at that seat dictating energy policy.
Yeah. It's so funny how that it almost took the entire attention away. Yep. You were just, by calling climate, you were able to ignore energy altogether.
You're exactly right. And Republicans fell into it. And so they didn't talk climate. Yep. So we have not talked serious energy policy. Because that table is empty if we're not at that seat at that table. And that's what I'm trying to do, is give us a seat at that table.
Yeah. Okay. So, because I want to talk about energy the whole time. I have so many questions. But I want to shift to, aside from energy and natural resources, something that's important to me, and I know pretty much anybody listening, is budgeting federal debt.
Yeah.
I know it's not a fun topic to talk about.
It's an important topic. I agree.
But I can't help but think, where do we start? And I think the Senate is going to always propose some things, and we're really dealing with the 435 members of Congress, right? To really pin down. We get these huge budgets that. How do we? Where do you see a path to?
So I see two important paths. The first one is the trajectory that we're trying to angle for as House Republicans. You've seen all of the dysfunction come out of D.C. this year, but behind that dysfunction is actually a strategy that has some chance, a high chance of success. Remember, we have about a 2-seat majority in the House. We don't have the Senate, and we don't have the presidency. Yeah. So if those are your negotiating cards going in, you got to, you're looking for anything that you can get here that you can take home as a victory. What we're shooting for right now as House Republicans is a budget next year that would spend less money than our previous year. If we can accomplish that, that would be the first time in the history of this country that we have spent less money in 1 year than we did the year before. There are many, and I'm going to agree with them, that says it's not enough. I agree. Remember, 2-seat majority, don't have the Senate, we don't have a strong negotiating position.
Right.
If we could work that deal, I'd come home and spike the ball and say, hey, one first down. Like,
is the feeling that the Democrats are like, it's okay to just keep spending the money? I can't believe that's true. It was until
just recently when we passed the $1.5 trillion IRA, Inflation Reduction Act, where we spent $600 billion on infrastructure. They were all saying, this is not a problem. That's not a problem. All of a sudden, they are, some of them, not all of them.
What do you think changed?
Inflation.
Just seeing inflation.
The Inflation Reduction Act,
and then it. I mean, you got to give time. Like sometimes I'm always curious. It's like, well, they just passed it like 2 months ago. What did you expect to happen? It was like, the numbers are turning around tomorrow.
I mean, when I was in college, they taught me inflation comes from too much money chasing too few goods. So what are we doing? We're turning on the faucets in spending, and we're over-regulating the supply chain. That's going to cause inflation. And so I think now some Democrats are starting to say, ooh, did we go too far? And yes, we did. We spent way too much money. We have to rein it in. So we're angling for this deal in the House. And if we can do that, then we need to what is the biggest impediment to us getting the deal are those on my side who said it's not enough. okay, I'm with you. It's not enough, but it's the deal we can get.
Yeah.
Right. So let's take it and then let's come back for another deal. Right. And let's keep, if we can turn that spending curve, right, that's what we need to do. You're not going to do it all in 1 year. Let's spend it. This bends it and actually starts it in the right direction. And then we have to keep going.
It's something I started to understand pretty quickly. It's a game of chess. You know, it's an illogical game of chess, right? In a way, it's like an endless game of chess. It's like you're always trying to move, or like even risk isn't even a great example of it, but you're trying to move the.
So imagine this: a game of chess, and you turn your back, and somebody's moved the pieces.
And then or you're required to turn around and the pieces move around like every couple of days.
And so throw in the media, right? Throw in all of
COVID,
these,
like
COVID,
just random
perfect example.
Israel, Palestine. You have all these
war breaks
Ukraine.
And so that's what we're dealing with. But I do think we're taking it serious, but not enough of us, and not serious enough. But we are getting some small victories. Now, the other category where I just think this is so clear that you're being lied to, and by you, I mean the American populace, is this idea that we're not going to touch Social Security or Medicare. 80%, we're budgeting 20% of our budget money. And so by us doing a small cut on 20% of our money, we're really fooling ourselves, right? Unless we're going to have a serious discussion about these other benefits that are automatic spending, we're not going to really rein this in. And my colleagues are afraid to talk about it, and they're wrong. And I don't mind being the guy that says we do need to make cuts here.
See, so I'll take, like, if we're going to play that game out, right? It seems to me like if I'm a business owner, I have my fixed expenses and I have my variable expenses, right? Yeah. And as of right now, because we keep allowing Social Security to go on when it was supposed to be a temporary thing, now we've ingrained it into the system, right? You've allowed full generations to go from start to finish into this Social Security system. It seems to me it's a fixed cost.
So let me slightly change that.
Yeah,
so
please.
One of the differences is remember, we have paid into this. This isn't like and people get mad when you call it an entitlement, because it's like, no, this is different than a government benefit. I paid into this.
Right.
So my whole life I paid into this.
Right.
And all I'm asking is for a reasonable return on that investment. But what we have done, we've done two things seriously wrong. One is the money that has gone in, we've just gone and spent. Right. We robbed, wrong, right? Like
we took money out of one pocket and put it in the other.
People should go to jail. They should really go to jail.
Truthfully,
for stuff like that. The second thing is we've not adapted to a changing world. And the world is that we're living longer.
I agree with you here.
And so I'm not talking about going to anybody near retirement age and saying we're going to change the rules on you, but I'm talking about going to my kids, right, in their 20s and early 30s and saying, look, let's be realistic.
Or the people that are in their 30s that'll raise their hand and be like, I'll do it.
Yeah, well, even in your 30s, right? I'm talking about, like, let's be careful if somebody's 65, right?
Yeah.
Like, let's they've planned on it, right? It's not fair to throw this curveball at them. But look, let's have a serious discussion about moving this back. The other thing is, I mentioned, you're paying into the system, but we cap Social Security at a certain income level. And I think we need to be able to say, okay, well, if we took that cap off, then it wouldn't be a dramatic hit really to anybody, and we would be able to keep this thing going. And those are hard decisions, right? It's hard to say we're going to move this age back, but we're not serious. We're not being fair with my kids if we don't make the changes, because it won't be there for them.
Yeah. Well, and I think the changes are going to have to be a requirement on the Social Security side. I think.
Yeah, it's so obvious, but yet I have colleagues who say, no, we're not touching that.
I think Trump really is the one who was like, hey, I'm not going to battle this, and so everybody other Republicans like, sweet, I don't have to either. Right? Do you think that's true?
I think it's true, and I think it's being dishonest.
Yeah, I think it's being dishonest too. I think so too. You're just pandering at that point.
Exactly.
It's pandering. So I guess. Going back to where do you think you could get to where we're spending less? Like where do you think are the biggest places that we could, because at this point it seems like everything seems important.
Well, and so you're right. And this is what happens is people line up at my office all day long. They say, hey, I'm here supporting this program. Please support this program. I get it. We don't have enough money. Don't support anybody else's program, but support mine. And then the next person walks in the door and says, well, like, I don't want you to support that last guy's. Yeah, but this one is the most important. And, in truth, they are really compelling things that they're asking for help for. I mean, it's hard to say no. But we have to really come back to, okay, what is the purpose of the federal government? And it's not to solve everybody's every problem. And so, we have to be just more, to answer your question, we have to be more thoughtful about what truly is government's responsibility. And then B, we got to go into this area that people are unwilling to touch, which is 80% of our budget, and say we have to be more realistic. And I could cut 100% of this, and it's not going to be enough. To get us back to where we need to be on spending.
There's a lot of big challenges ahead of us. So you have the budget's a big one. I know energy. I think we should continue to try to change the conversation. Stop talking about climate, but it's energy and climate. Maybe we just combine the two and say you can't have one without the other.
And that is today's world, right?
That's another big one. I think immigration is a pretty big one. It's interesting to me that we know we're in a labor shortage. And we're allowing a bunch of laborers into the country, but it's just this
I got the answer.
Controlled.
I've got the answer.
Okay.
I got this.
He's got it. Immigration. John Curtis, immigration.
You know how President Trump branded the wall, right?
He branded it.
I am going to brand the gate.
The gate.
The gate.
Okay, the gate.
Right. Because in reality, we do need people, and we want people to come into this country. But we want it to be the people who we've said, please come into our country. People.
I like the gate. I like this idea.
Yes, people who will obey our laws, pay our taxes, respect our culture. And some of them just want to come through that gate and go back home. And some of them kind of want to go through that gate and stay. And we need to realize these are two different groups.
Some of them don't have a choice.
Some of them don't have a choice, right? And so what we've done is we've created this debate where, on one hand, everybody gets to come in without any vetting, or nobody gets to come in. That's kind of the false narrative that we have set up. In reality, what we want is we want to make sure that the people who are coming into the country are the people we want. I have a home and it's on a park, and I put a fence up around my yard. And during the day, there's a lot of people over in that park. I would love to have them just saunter into my yard, and we're good friends. And
you'd love to say hi.
I'd love to say hi when we come in.
Pet the dog.
Pet the dog. At night, I lock the gate.
Yeah.
Right. And this is the symbolism.
And you don't want them to have their dog poop on your lawn when you're not home.
Right. And I want to be able to say which dog comes in and which dog doesn't
exactly.
come in. Right? And so I think that we've set this up to okay, you're not humane if you don't want to let anybody in, or you're crazy if you want to let everybody in. And that's just this false narrative, this false choice.
I think so few people actually believe that. So it's such a small percentage of people that actually believe that.
Well, and right now, the reality of it is everybody on both sides of the aisle, they know. It's like the budget. They know we're spending too much money. They know people are coming in right now.
It just has to get to such an extreme level.
And it has. It's gone way past extreme, and this is not right what's happening. And
what numbers do you, when you look at the numbers and say over the last year or 2 years, how many estimated illegal? Because I think that the Department of Defense, Homeland Security has a number. What do you look at?
Well, I'm hearing 300,000 a month.
300,000 a month.
A month. And here's the number that is most troubling. The cartels are making $30 million. What's called a sector. In short periods of time, and it's human trafficking, and we're condoning it.
And NGOs are facilitating it on top of it.
Yes, and these people are coming from these third world countries and traveling all these great distances in conditions that we would just not. That are horrible, and we're encouraging that by saying, "Come on in." We are encouraging that, and the cartels are making billions of dollars, and it's not right.
And we can't. We don't know who's good and who's not. We don't know who.
We need a system to vetting and letting the right people in. There are people who will come. They'll obey our laws. They'll pay taxes. And we need them for jobs. We need them here in the state of Utah. In almost any industry you look at, we do need them. And we're failing our businesses on that side. We're failing our residents on the side that anybody gets to come in and overrun our country and be a drag on our society. And the fentanyl that's coming through that southern border is just that issue alone is a reason to put a gate up.
In 2000, I was like a sophomore in college. So it was like 2007, and I did a paper specifically on immigration.
Oh, cool.
And I looked at the Democratic policy that they were running through, and then also the Republican policy that were coming through. And I think McCain, he was a senator in Arizona at the time, and he sponsored one where we were raising the cap on the allowable legal immigrants, right? Because a lot of people don't know we have a pretty extreme number of limits as to how many people can come into the country, period.
Which is one of the reasons they come illegally.
Yeah, and it changes depending on the country that you're from, right? So like Ireland is only allowed this many people. I wonder why, because there were so many people from Ireland at one point. Mexico had a big cap, but people were walking through Mexico from all these other countries, which is what's happening, right? Is this a Mexican immigrant, or is this a Guatemalan, or wherever they're from, right?
Southern border,
So I remember thinking, these people want to be here. The studies show that when they're here, by the second generation, that second generation is bilingual, and by the third generation, they don't speak the native tongue of where they came from. So, just a couple of generations later, you just have an American again, right? Like you had an immigrant, and they brought some of their culture, which I honestly love. It's some of the coolest parts of this country is the fact that I can go to Chinatown and not have to go all the way to China. Like you get a feel of like, what does this culture look like right here in the States? What makes America awesome?
I'll tell you a really cool story. There's a congressman out of Texas. His name's Henry Cuellar.
Okay.
His father picked cherries in Utah as an immigrant.
Yeah.
And now his son is a U.S. congressman.
It's crazy.
Yes.
Yeah.
And did it, of course, legally. And I think this is the whole point, is like, let's get this system in so people can have that path legally, right? And let's get the right people in and keep the wrong people out. And what's happening at the border right now is really just almost a conscious decision of President Biden that is not humane.
He has a conscious thought? No, I'm just kidding.
Oops, okay.
I'm just kidding. I'm kidding.
It's not humane.
That's inappropriate.
Right. It's not humane.
It's not.
It's not in our country's interest, and we need to turn that corner as quickly as we can.
I think there's fear drives a lot of what we're doing.
Yes, absolutely.
In a lot of different places. If somebody's listening to this and there's a fear of legal immigration, like somebody coming to take your jobs or take your culture or take all these things, I think that's a misconception. I think a lot of people that come here are here to start something new. Where they were is not where they wanted to be.
Yeah. So let me ask this question: if you were in one of these countries, would you not try to come to the United States?
Right.
Yeah. Would you not?
Of course I would.
Yeah. And so then let's help them figure out how to do it legally.
Yeah.
Right? Let's make it a process.
Yeah.
Okay, get in line. Yeah, maybe it takes a while, but at least there's a process, right, to where they can go through.
Now, I'll say this. I know you've made a statement last thing, because I know we're running a little bit out of time. And this is a big topic, but this is, I know it goes by so fast. You're in support of Ukraine. You're in support of Israel. Is that true? Do I got that right?
Well,
I know it's kind of in a nutshell.
It's nuanced.
It's nuanced.
Yeah. So let me say, first of all, with Israel, there's no reservations. What's happening with Hamas is if you care about October 7th, Hamas has to go. If you care about what's happening to the Palestinians, Hamas has to go. Period.
Yeah. And also, if you're listening to this, you're an American, you probably won't understand. You're not going to fully understand it.
And that doesn't mean, look, these Palestinians, I totally get it, that are in the way of Hamas. And yes, this is, my heart bleeds, but Hamas must go. Ukraine, just quickly, and I know we're out of time, but listen, most of my colleagues want to help Ukraine, but they have questions. And their questions are, what is our goal? For instance, is it to take back the original borders of 2 years ago? Is it to take back the borders of pre-Crimea? Is it to take? Are we okay with Putin having some boundaries? Our president has not articulated that goal, and all my colleagues are saying, tell me what the goal is, and I'll give you money, right? I'm okay with that. The second thing they have a problem with is they feel like we're drawing this war to a tie. And why are we slow walking all of these resources over there? Had we given them everything we've given them on day one, this war would be over. And that's very frustrating to my colleagues. And I think the third thing is they just want to make sure, they want to go back to their constituents and say, this money was spent well. So just the accountability on it. And I guarantee you, if the president would do that, that funding would open up. There still would be a few who just don't want to fund it all. But that's what's holding most people back, is simply like, come on, President, show us some leadership and show us exactly what the U.S. goal is here. And then they're afraid we're going to have an Afghanistan, that we're going to draw this to a tie for 20 years, and then the United States is going to walk away. And that's what's happening with most of my colleagues and why they're hesitant to fund. And I think they're totally right in having those reservations, and they're fixable. Yeah. And then I'll just say this, we cannot let Putin win. Yeah. This is more about Ukraine, in the U.S. interest. And this is the deal. I say, like, would you take this deal? If I told you that if we took 3.5% of our defense budget, not our overall budget, but just our defense budget, and we decimated the second largest army in the world without losing a single American life, would you take that deal?
That's
Of course you would, right? Everybody, right? And
I don't know. I'm having a hard time saying I would, truthfully, but I don't. I know we have a lot of time. I don't want to debate on this point, but your point, I think your point's really well made, because we're saying we're saving American lives. This is a deterrent, right?
Yeah.
This
we're
is an
looking
ability
at this not from what you
a large
best for
strategy.
Ukraine. We're looking at this what's best for the United States.
Correct.
If Putin had rolled into Ukraine in 3 days, like everybody thought he would, take the country, do you seriously think, like, how long before he goes into a NATO nation? Now we're putting men and women's U.S. boots on the ground, and now we're losing U.S. men and women's lives, and that's why I think this is a bargain.
Yeah, and then it goes back. I landed right back on fear. Is that, man? That a lot of these things that drive us are fear. Yeah. But hey, I want to wish you best of luck.
Okay, can we do this again? Because we have so much more to talk about.
You're really sharp. I think you're going to give everybody a run for their money for that Senate seat.
Thank you.
I'm excited to see how it goes.
Thanks so much. Yeah, thanks for having me here.